process for people to apply, so people can still apply. We just will not designate a school for those families until after the boundary work is done. We have to know, obviously, where our students are going, which buildings might still be feeling a little full, because there are places where we will be still tight on space even with the opening of the new building. So we don't want to make promises to people that are coming in that want to come into the system as to where they'll go. So we'll still go through the application process. We just won't notify until after that is done. Another reason why we want to try to move this process forward, we want to do our due diligence and take the time that we need, and also we really want to meet our February timeline so that we can also inform those families. So thank you for that question.
The other component is it's very important that if we have people that have kindergartners that they do come and enroll, because that does impact our staffing. So don't wait on those decisions. And folks that may be applying for open enrollment, make that application. Again, we're going to wait, but that also does help us as we deal with our staffing. And that's another component of this as well, is that once the boundary is done, then we have to go through the whole staffing shift and adjustment. So we want to make sure we get staff in the right position, in the right places to be able to address their needs as well.
Go ahead.
So thank you for the update. So end of February is the tentative timeline. Are you baking in if the school board has iterations that we want to provide feedback? Because what I don't want to be in a position, which feels like the case is quite often, where we get a proposal and then we got to vote on it right away. And so if we get a proposal by the end of February, I would assume that we would want a decent amount of time for the public to be able to see the proposal, have commentary before we do any kind of vote, which if we follow the cadence, we're looking at March 27th for an actual vote. Now, that's with the assumption if the proposal comes to the board and we agree with the proposal. But if we don't, what is your remediation plan if we don't? Or is there no remediation plan? And the end of February 28th deadline is the deadline.
I'll chime in to start out with, Emily, if you don't mind. Sure. Number one, again, remember the board isn't voting on whether they like an iteration or if they want changes. You're either voting it up or you're voting it down. That's the design team and the input team, if you remember that conversation with Ray. And really the process, people should have the ability within the community to have their opportunity to see the iterations and make their input. So it shouldn't be something where, hey, this is exactly what it is. People will already have seen it, had the opportunity to provide input, which you'll be able to hear and see, and you'll have that feedback from them. So it's not going to be something like, well, here's a plan. They'll already have seen the plan, given feedback, see the plan again, give feedback. That's what Emily, I think, was trying to touch base on. There's going to be a couple of different opportunities for people to be able to do that through the input team. And then community as a whole through online, different things that they have the ability to do. So there'll be feedback through that whole process, probably from about the end of January through the end of February, when we're hoping to have that decision made.
Can I add one more thing? And that is that, and thank you for that, Doug. The other piece of that, the thing that I neglected to mention, is that of course we will bring all of that to a work session. So prior to, whether that means we have to add one or we're ready to bring it to the one that's in February. That's definitely part of the plan, because we do want to make sure that you all have time to understand the process, the iterations, the feedback, and all of those things before we bring it to you for a vote. But we will have lots of input along the way in terms of what those boundaries end up looking like.
Any other questions from board members?
Good.
Okay. All right, so we'll move on to our next discussion item, which is the Public Engagement Committee. We met, and so we'll just have like a short update on that. Terry is going to do that.
Okay, I'm just going to take from the notes that you took. We met on December 4th. It was Carly and myself and Kim, and we tried to brainstorm activities that we might get involved in as individual board members. And some of them came up, like January 27th from 9 to 12 at the Heritage Center in the morning. It's a community day of volunteering. It's sponsored by Lions. I didn't bring that one up, by the way. So
No, you didn't.
A non-Lion person did, which is great. The Lions put together activities that people volunteer to do, making blankets, cards for veterans, all kinds of things for kids that are in for under cancer treatment, different kinds of activities for them. So if you're interested, you could go to that. And we talked about reaching out to individual organizations for events that board members could participate in, or volunteer work, and relationship building activities for the board members. And then we talked a little bit about community forum. The purpose would depend on the audience. In other words, we would meet with a Somali community, for example, and the purpose might be just to listen for their concerns. We would be asking the community what they need from the school board right now. So the purpose would be different depending on the group. It could be the Indian community, senior citizens at the Heritage Center, and give them an education about what the board needs from what they need from the school board right now, and what the board is doing, taxes, volunteering in the schools for seniors. And then we thought connecting with Lydia to identify more groups that we could meet. And student groups, special education groups, possibly meeting with the city council, sharing the mission and values. Now, we used to do that, I think, yearly, meet with the city council and go over our long-term plan, their long-term plan. That's a possibility. And then we would substitute these community forums for the board development sessions that we normally have. I think it's the second Tuesday or whenever we have that, and then we would use that for a community forum of some type. In other words, we would go to the community rather than asking them to come to the district office. So we have a to-do list that I think you're working on, Kim. Stakeholder sessions, introduction for board members, how to start a stakeholder session, and you're going to work on a rough draft and give that to us. And then we decided that this Community Day of Volunteering through the Lions on January 27th is something that we thought would be a really good activity for us to be at. Now, the questions that came up, and we don't have time to talk about them, but if I'm going to throw out, I think, two things. If you could email Kim or Carly or myself, what are the metrics are we going to use to achieve these goals? Do we keep track of where we're going all the time, going to sports events, whatever? But that's kind of, in a way, it's kind of tough for all of us to do that. People like me that are retired, I can do that all the time. I can really look good on that category. But people that have other commitments and jobs, that's going to be impossible to do. But so how do we keep track of those activities? And then my second question is, do we want to use this as a baseline? What are we doing now? And then see if we get any better next year. In other words, how do we know if we achieve the goal if we just do it this year? So what did I leave out? Anything?
I don't think you left out anything. We were thinking about not only about us engaging with the community, but us engaging with each other in a more relaxed format or context, which is why we brought up the Community Day of Volunteering. It would be a way for us to engage with the community, but also with each other and do something fun that we know that is supporting the needs of our community. So that was kind of where we were going with that. We're hoping that we can keep an eye on some of the things that the Chamber of Commerce is doing too, on things that the board members can do together, as well as things that we can do within the community. Do you have stuff to add, Carly?
No, I think one of the things we were trying to be thoughtful of is not necessarily adding a ton. We have a lot of meetings, and so if this would supplement some of our meetings, then that way we were hoping all board members could attend these events. And it is about kind of trying to reach groups that maybe in recent years we're not getting as connected with or doing some other things together. To your question, Terry, one of the things we could look at is just even as we evaluate ourselves as a board, part of this is about community engagement, part of it is about getting to know each other as board members and working together on different things. And so we have survey data on both kind of the public perception of our board as well as how each board member feels about the board. So it could be, we could look at past data and compare it to, if we have the intervention starting in January, We could look at kind of past data and future data on that.
Okay, I think it's a good idea. But if anyone else has anything they'd like to add to that, or just email us about the metrics, how do we achieve the goal, how do we know we achieved the goal? Thank you.
Terry, are you going to send something out about the Community Day of Volunteering, or send something to Kim so that board members know like what time that starts and where they
Sure.
go to do that?
I can do that.
Okay, that'd be great.
I'll be there helping running it, so.
Judy?
So, thank you for that input stuff. So one of the things that I would.
Are you on?
So one of the things that I would recommend, and there's a lot of volunteer opportunities just going on in our own schools and with our groups. Last week, I was fortunate enough to be able to volunteer for DECA. They needed volunteers to help with their annual conference that they do. And also last week, our equity department had their resource fair, the family resource fair. They had like 40 families show up in here, and they all mingled around, had got vision tests done, and had dinner, and had their technology updated or fixed and stuff like that. So I know we've got like the Google Calendar has a lot of those events on there, right?
I have been tracking like when I register everyone for things or things if I see.
But do we have a school calendar that has their events listed?
Not necessarily to that level. Like
Okay.
group, you know.
Yeah, because I usually, like, I pay attention a lot to the high school ones for sure, because that's where they have a lot of volunteer opportunities and stuff. So, you know, so for me, I think it's really important, like, I go to their individual schools and kind of see what activities are going on so that I can be a part of our school activities as well. And then even just as a Rotary member, being involved, you know, Lions, that helps connect you as well to a lot of the communities and then brings all these opportunities to you too. So I'm trying to I don't know what the solution is. So if Kim or anybody has an idea of how it can be easier for us to know what's going on at the schools or where volunteers are needed and stuff, to let us know. I mean, we can't be getting emails for everything.
No,
but if there could be a calendar with some sort of an event.
We talked about that before, about having like, I know the individual buildings usually send out like their newsletter, and it's like a s'more. Even
Yep.
if we had like a Google Doc that had all the s'mores on it for the buildings, we could click the links on our own time and look at them. That's an option. It just depends on how the building principals are handling that.
I know it, and that's what it makes it, because I don't want to add any more work to their plate. But, you know, if they're posting events, if we could just be able to monitor that. But the volunteer events, you know, with the DECA needing the volunteers, I mean, it was a really easy thing to, you know, look at your calendar and, yeah, I can join it. And, you know, we had, gosh, probably 100 kids there. So anyway, I'm just trying to figure out what a solution would be for there, so if everybody can give it some thought and stuff, because there's a lot of volunteering needs just within our groups, within our own schools.
Okay.
So,
Is that something you could check on with the principals and see if?
I think we can visit with the administrators, and we can also visit with the communications department, because there's multiple things, because we've already asked them to send some information to us in regard to just different events. We haven't necessarily asked about volunteers, so we'll put our heads together, see what we can come up with.
Sure,
yeah.
thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so our next update is coming from the Public Engagement Committee. Policy Committee, sorry. I repeated myself.
Yes, so Director Schindling and Director Keller, we met Monday the 4th. It was super fun, lots of fireworks. So people laughed, people cried. A lot of good things we did to get started. So we'll share a couple fun facts, some data, the workflow approach, the roadmap, the cadence, and then kind of our guiding North Star as we kind of move forward. So we did some data analysis. We've got policies from 2009. And so want to just be mindful, each policy within our school district has a revision date, and it has an adopted date and a review date. There are instances, from what I've heard, that some policies may have been reviewed but those dates were not updated for whatever reason. So the data that we've collected was just based on what's date currently on display on those respective documents. And so with that being said, we have 125 school board policies. About 24% of them have been reviewed and they're less than 3 years old. We've got 64% of them that are 6 years and older. And so that is a handful for us to make sure that we can review and take care of. That equates to about 444 pages of policies that we need to take a look at. The good news that this year for 2023, 22 policies were updated, so fantastic. I do want to share those 22 policies were reviewed by this board, and the changes that generally occurred were due to legal and statutory reasons. And so that prompted a desire for us to establish a policy committee so that the school board would have a community school board Lakeview lens at the policy itself. And so our workflow approach would be to look at these documents and do some research, look at MSBA, look at what other schools might be doing within our community, and then just put a Lakeville lens on it where it makes sense. Our small committee would then hopefully come to an alignment on these policies and then bring it to the board during a working session for initial review. From there, we'll share with you the good and the bad and why we recommend this approach to the policy updates. And then if you guys are in alignment, we will then move it to the regular board meeting. And so the roadmap that we've got, there's a lot to do. The good news is that 22 have already been done from a statutory perspective, so we'll be in sync with the HR team here with what they have on their roadmap. But for us, the biggest priority would be policy 208, which is reviewing and developing policies. So once we get that nailed down, we'll transition to policy 100 and 200. The goal is to have them tackled hopefully in Q1 of 2024. But with that being said, we will have to increase our cadence of how often we meet. So we will be meeting twice a month. We will be starting December 20th.
Actually, just clarify, every 2 weeks.
I'm sorry. Every 2 weeks.
Every 2 weeks.
Every 2 weeks, we'll be meeting starting on December 20th at 6:30 right here at the district office. So for those who would like to be a part of it, listen, bring some popcorn, it'd be fantastic. Our biggest goal that we want to do, part of this process, is to provide transparency around the policies that we will be reviewing. So we will always try to be 2 to 3 months out to let folks know, here are the policies that would be kind of on our docket to be reviewed. The only open item that we have yet to resolve that we will bring back to the board here would be new intakes for policies. So what does that process look like, where someone has an idea to discontinue certain things or add certain things? And so want to be mindful of that process while don't want to limit folks' ideas, but want to make sure that does this policy committee have that responsibility for new items? So I'll pause here. That is the data, the workflow approach, our roadmap, and our cadence, and our North Star. Questions?
Bree or Judy, do you have anything to add?
The one thing I would just say so in upcoming meetings, and if we have something, let's say that we have certain policies that we want, that could change depending on how long each policy may take per meeting. So that it could change. So just understand that we need to be flexible to get everyone, we want everyone to be flexible as well.
Yeah, there are some policies that are 35 pages, some that are like 2.
Right.
And just to clarify, administratively, we're still moving forward with addressing the policies as we were directed to do.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
And so I don't want people to think that there's
Right.
not other work still going on as far as the changes that have to take place based off of statute and
Yep.
those type of things. So that's still in process as well.
And we
Yeah,
did,
and-
go ahead.
I was going to say, so we did talk about that because our intent is to look at the ones that have already been completed, knowing that they're statutorial and legally updated, and reviewing those to see if there's any local updates to make to those. So that's where we were going to be starting in the 100s and 200s with those. And then the 200s are the 200s, so we were going to really try to get that done in Q1.
Carly?
Yeah, I guess thank you for clarifying that. That was my question, is how is this going to work alongside, or what if you guys are kind of butting up to what they're doing? You won't change the cadence of what they are doing, correct?
Yeah, so the intent is not to disrupt what what the
No.
administration is doing, to make sure that they review policies to update them from a statutory perspective. So our intent is to focus on the 100 and the 200 series. The 200 series, just for the general public, it is the policies that how the school board operates. So if we do that in Q1, in parallel, we will sprinkle about probably some of the 22 that have already been done this year, so that we can have that lens. So we'll have a backlog more than likely as you continue down your path, or when the administration continues down their path, and so we'll try to catch up. We don't anticipate catching up, but we will do our best. But we'll always want to make sure that the administration has first glance, making sure legal, statutory, those are updated, and then we'll bring it down to our respective groups.
And we put ourselves on a 3-year cycle
Yes.
as well.
Yeah.
Yep.
So then if you guys make changes, does that then have to go back through legal?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. So is there anything we should be considering with regard to cost or that time, that kind of thing?
Yeah. Good question.
Is there something we should be thinking about in terms of time and cost of that process?
Yeah, so from my understanding, that if policies do not change dramatically from its original intent, I don't believe there's a major legal review that's necessary, but that could be something we can take offline.
Yeah, no, I
So
don't
I
think-
guess to answer your question the way I understood what you said, depending on the change, if you're just changing like changing a word that doesn't change the intent or the content or doesn't impact anything statutorily, it probably isn't that big of a deal, but it's also going to depend on what you add, because it may be something that isn't necessarily statutorial in nature, but it could create a discrepancy or a
Yeah.
conflict with statute. So it'll probably have to get run by legal counsel regardless. It would be my opinion, because the last thing you want to do is write something that opens you up for an issue.
And we wanted to make sure that we weren't doing each one individually, that there would be several. So it's not, put them together rather than having one at each time. And then one, send to legal, two, have a few at one time, so it's not, maybe as expensive.
It might just be helpful to do a batch and see how it goes and report back to us about kind of the whole with Brenda too. How does this impact Brenda? And
Yep, that's what, we
That's what
had a
we're
really
doing.
good discussion. Actually, it was a really good discussion about how working with Brenda and making sure that we're on the same page, so then she's not adding more to her plate because she's already got a lot, and how we can, all work together to make sure it's cohesive.
And we did not want to interfere with what has already been put in place for you.
Good.
All right. So we'll keep moving on, just because we're trying to keep our eye on time here with a regular session coming up after this. We have some recommended actions that will be coming up during our regular board meeting after this that we need to have some updates on and discuss. The first one would be item A, which is the resolution of combining polling locations. Bill, are you presenting on that one?
No, it's myself, and Kim will chime in along the way.
Okay.
So you were forwarded some information in regard to the polling locations. I think this is something that as a district has been talked about prior to my arrival. Currently, if you remember, several of you were involved in election night, and there are 20 different polling places, which for a district our size seems to be quite a large number, given the fact that we also have opportunities for people to vote in advance. And so one of the things that we have to be able to do is reflect, and then if there are going to be changes to the possibility of polling locations, that has to come to you to make that decision at this time of the year. And so it just kind of happens to fall after the fact that we already had a levy and a vote that took place. So what we've been able to put together, and Kim did most of this work, so if there's a huge question about it, I may look at her like, what do you think? So we have 20 based off of mileage, number of people that have voted, different things. She would recommend, and has talked to people from the city and the county as well, that we would condense that down to 9 different polling locations. And as the information that she shared with you as far as distances, that's all part of the other agenda that she forwarded to you over the last several days. I think you sent it out Thursday or Friday for people to take a look at. And so it just really boils down to a couple of different things. The number of people that seem to show up at polling places. There is an additional cost for poll workers. It is harder to find people to being 20 different polling locations. There's pluses and minuses no matter how you look at it, but she has talked to, and I'm not trying to put words into her mouth, somebody that's done the job before, and the current people in the city and the county. They're like, we're not exactly sure why you have 20 polling locations. It seems to be a very high number. So really the conversation is this something that you want to take a look at for this particular year? It's something boards have looked at in the past, didn't make a decision on, but we feel like it's something you need to revisit now. Because this is the time of the year you have to do it by the end of the year to make that particular decision. So we've shared that information. If something you want to do, it's on the agenda. It can be actioned on the regular meeting, or it can be something you say, hey, we're not ready to do. But I would tell you it seems to make sense. As I look at it, Kim, anything that you want to add, having been the person who walked through that?
Can I just ask,
Sorry. I did do my due diligence on this, just trying to get some more information on this. And I did call around and talk to some representatives about this, checking to make sure, because I know staffing's been an issue, in lots of areas after COVID. And I did find out for our polling places that they actually had more than enough election judges. They were turning people away. So even though we had 20 polling locations, they had enough staff to run those. Just throwing that in there. At least that's the information that was shared with me. And then also from a personal standpoint, this, just to clarify, would only be in the elections that are the off-year school district only election. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so then my question with that would be, for example, I typically vote at a church. I went to my regular polling place this time, and that location was not open. And there was a line of people behind me that had the same issue. They showed up at that location. It was on the list that was provided to us that was supposed to be where we were going to vote. So then we ended up going to the school district that was down the street, the school district building, and our polling place had already been combined into that location. And like I said, maybe they sent a card, maybe they didn't, but there was a lot of individuals with me that were supposed to vote in that location that were confused because that was their location and it was closed. So I guess my concern with combining locations would be then almost every other year it's a different place for people to vote, and then I'm worried about it discouraging people from voting.
Well, I guess I would say this. You can maybe have spoken to the people from the city or the county, but Kim's the person that had to hire all the election judges. And I would tell you that she didn't have an exorbitant amount of people to be able to fill that.
Yeah, to be fair, I found them, but they
Right.
came from all of our surrounding cities. And I was lucky that I was ahead of the game for the other people, because then I got complaints that I stole election. That's not going to be the biggest
Right.
problem here. And as to not, I don't understand what you're saying. If we had advertised the polling locations that they were, it's going to change all the time. The city just made changes to where their polling locations are. We are not in a society anymore that can say you are for sure going to be here every time you vote forevermore. That's why we are going to advertise even more how to look up. What is your precinct? Where are you supposed to go this time? We're going to send out notices. It's in the paper twice. There's countless ways to figure it out. Plus, I probably fielded 100 calls from people asking where do I go vote. So I think that's going to be the reality. We'll have to advertise it very well and let people know that we're convincing, because that's a worry for sure. But we're going to be on top of that communication.
Yeah. And as far as a location not being open, not to my understanding, because we had polling, every judge came in and brought in their ballots and stuff from whatever location they were at. Now, again, it may be a change from the last time somebody voted to where they were now, but
that wasn't us.
that wasn't necessarily us that made that adjustment.
Their decisions, and we have to follow what the city does.
Yeah.
But this is us. This
So,
is
yeah.
us taking the cities.
Right, but this was a school district election, and it was listed on our school district thing. So I'm just saying that, like, it was Trinity Church. So we go there and we vote.
Trinity had to go because of construction to Lakeville South this year. That was what the city of Lakeville told us. That was done last December.
They have
Due
to
to the
make
road
their
construction.
changes in December, just like we have to make our changes.
For next year.
Okay.
But that's what I mean. That's going to happen here.
So if you decide to do something, communication, to your point, I think Kim is 100% accurate. How do you communicate those changes? Just like the city, if they make any changes to their polling locations now, they've got to communicate that for upcoming elections, just like we would. So you have that information, you have the ability to take a look at it, and so it just, I'll shut up and you can ask other questions.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I've got two questions. One, just to make sure I understand. So there's currently, there's 20 precincts in our community. Only 20 polling places. So there isn't 20 precincts, or is there more or less?
Are they called precincts?
They're called precincts, from my understanding.
Careful of the semantics is what I would say. We have 3 locations in Scott County. We have Eureka Township. We have areas that are actually Farmington, Roseland. We have 20 locations where people go vote at. All of our school district families.
For a school district, great. And so we, and how many years have we had that many?
As far as I know.
Okay. And so what's the cost savings if we try to shrink it down from the 20 locations to 9?
For election judges, probably $10,000 to $15,000. When you consider the amount of time of the other people that are working 20 locations and the testing of the machines and the delivery of the machines and organizing the paperwork, I don't know what that is.
Do we have an idea of how much it costs to do the levy this year?
Well, I think we had it budgeted $80,000.
Okay. How much did we
We
spend?
have all the final numbers in yet, so we can certainly give you a report on it.
Okay. So if we budgeted 80, and if we're condensing it in half, we're going to try to save 40 ballpark-ish?
It won't be half, because there's other expenses that we have. Because when we have to report out or we send notices to, all that mailing information is in our cost. So that doesn't go away. So I'd say you probably save about 25%.
Got it.
Where we're at.
So we're going to try to save 25%, condense our locations, and have to do additional communications to share the updates of these locations of the change. And then the following year, it could be back to the original way that they're normally voting, which then might cause some confusion because that's where they voted last year for the school district stuff. I don't know. I'd have to talk through this more and learn more, but for a 25%
different changes.
savings
The
doesn't make
city
sense.
also has the ability to change their
Yeah.
polling location, so
Yeah.
it's just not, the communication has to go forward regardless, because whether we make a change, the city may make a change. So there's always going to have to be communication, along with the fact that we communicate out the opportunity to do your early balloting,
Yep.
which a lot more people have the ability to have been taken advantage of. So we're presenting it to you because it's the time of the year that we have to present it. It's been something that was discussed before, and Kim going through it for the first time is like, there's a lot of redundancy with the number of locations. You have to keep your Scott County ones because Scott County does something different than Dakota County in regard to how they do things. So we're just presenting it to you in regard to that it seems to make sense to us that we have the ability. And when other people that oversee elections say the same thing to us, that we're not exactly sure why you have 20, condensing it down would seem to make sense as long as you continue to communicate. So again, that's what we're sharing with you.
Go ahead.
Among other comment is that the city does change it quite regularly, their location. So we don't have any control over that. But if we were consistent with ours, it might make a difference.
And this is only for our standalone elections, you understand that? We're not messing,
Right.
this year, we're not messing with anything. This just gives us the opportunity to condense. And, you have some of these places that 300 people come in, but we had to cover it from 7 in the morning till 8 at night and bring all the equipment, the testing, the Dakota County numbers. It's okay if we don't make a change, but it's good to review and reflect and look for where you can improve. So that's why you've got the 2 options.
So I'm going to take one more question because we have 40 minutes worth of items left on the agenda with 20 minutes left on the clock. So was
I
there
just want to
something-
ask, since we're moving into like a major election year, is this going to make a difference for next year? So is it something that we can talk about, have more discussion about, and it's not going to make a difference for this?
The only way it makes a change is if you were to, as a school board, run an election outside of the general elections that the city and the
Right.
county are already going to
Yeah,
do.
so we're not going to do that next year.
But you have to make your decision now. Well, I can't say you are or not. There may be something that gets presented that you have to make a decision on whether it's a bond or a levy, or I don't know, I'm just
We
throwing that out there.
decide to do
'Cause
something in April,
there
like a
could be-
bond.
Yeah, right. I'm not saying you are, but I'm just saying, this is the time of the year you have to make that decision, just like the city has to make their decisions now at this
Has to
time of
be
the year
made
for any
before
changes they have
December
coming up.
31st.
So, again, we're just presenting it because we feel like we're doing our due diligence. It's the time of the year that we have to be able to do it. If it doesn't change, it runs with the 20. If it does change, there's an opportunity. Again, it's only if we, as a school district, run something in a standalone. All the other elections are run by others, so those polling places are already set by them. This would just be if something were to happen and you as a board wanted to put something else on the ballot next year outside of the other elections.
All right. So let's move on from that discussion and go on to item B, which is the Haas naming agreement.
Shared that information with you. We presented from the city last week, I believe it was sent to me, and I told you it was coming your way. There's a naming agreement for Hasse Arena. It's a JPA that we are involved in. We do not necessarily have the naming rights of that. It's under the guidance of the JPA on how that's handled. But the Hasse family has approached the city, who oversees that, and has said that they're willing to continue to pay to have their name on Hasse Arena, and they shared the dollar amount over a 20-year period, a 10-year, and then another 10-year dollar amount. So cities are going to be presenting it. It's going to be on the arena board agenda as well. The city said technically they probably don't have to have us vote on it, but since it was voted on in the past, they'd like for us to be able to vote on that decision. So that's what's in front of you with the Hasse naming arena. It's already Hasse. They're just asking that the family is willing to do it and will pay for the naming rights.
Yep.
Any discussion or questions on that? Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, so I appreciate the tremendous generosity of that, and so I think this is from my point of view, a slam dunk, or it's a no-brainer. But I do want to be mindful that it is a 20-year agreement, and we just got this information. I just received this information on Friday, and so while I don't anticipate this not passing, but I want to be mindful that I want to be mindful that we're not making decisions too fast and not allowing our community members to provide input or provide general awareness. And so I just want to be mindful of that because of our most recent transaction that has caused some email swirl. So in my mind, I just found this out last Friday, and so I understand. Now, again, this is a 20-year agreement, a 20-year arrangement, and just want to be mindful that we're providing enough transparency and awareness for our community members. So is there a deadline?
I
Like,
guess
does
I
this
would,
have to
I
be
guess I
done?
would add the transparency of what happened on the other item that you mentioned, which I don't think was fair to mention on this same thing, was done legally and the way it was supposed to be done. As far as this, as soon as I was given the information, you were provided the information.
Okay.
It's an agreement that's been in place that really we are components of with the city in regard to that. And as you mentioned, I think the generous donation that the family is willing to do to continue to have something that's already been named after them. I think if people in the community had an issue with the family having their name on there, you probably would have heard something before now, rather than just when the naming of it comes up. So the timing of it, we didn't necessarily have any control over. We were asked to present this because it was being presented to us at the time it was. The council's going to take a look at it. The board arena is going to be taking a look at it this month as well. I was asked to put it on the agenda by the city, so I'm doing what we asked to do. As far as the other naming rights, in regard to that, you have to be comfortable with what you're comfortable with. But I would say that we are doing our due diligence based upon what we were offered, and it is an ongoing agreement that's already been in place for numerous years that hasn't had any issues.
Just to clarify, it's already named Hasse Arena. So
Yes,
it's already
100% agree.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So I guess, Brian, like I understand where your concern lies too, because I always think we go back to our policies because that dictates how we do things, and we don't really have a naming policy. So,
We do.
well, no.
This
What does it say?
this is a city responsibility with the naming. So we're just supporting the efforts that they went through to negotiate and work with a community member who has been highly engaged in donating and supporting our programs. So this is our supporting the work that our city has done, and the naming has to do with their facilities, but it's a joint powers agreement that we work together so that our students and our figure skaters and associations and stuff can use the facilities.
Correct.
So I think we have to be careful we're not overstepping what isn't within our purview, and the courtesy is of putting it onto our agenda to vote on
was just
in
stating that.
partnership with our NJPA agreement.
Any further comments or discussion on this item right now? Okay, so we're going to go ahead, in the sake of time, move on. Because the last thing we have on our recommended actions for tonight would be the review of the Pay 24 tax levy. Bill, I hope you can talk fast.
I can try to talk for you guys. I'm not sure everybody's got it in front of them. I'm not sure if anybody's got it up electronically or not. But just want to touch base on the levy for Pay 24 levy. In the meeting coming up, we will be doing our tax hearing, and we'll go through all this in detail again. But I wanted to just point out a couple of changes so everybody understands where we are with our levy. So on the front page, when we see the general fund portion of the tax, as you know, we just passed a $100 per pupil unit levy, so that's where we're seeing a change from what we talked about back in September. On the first line, equity revenue, you see we actually are going down a tiny bit. That is also because we passed the new referendum. The equity revenue is a formula for school districts across Minnesota that really don't have operating levies, and they have a way to generate a few more dollars. But because we increase our operating levy, we're going to get less dollars there. So you see we're down about $75,000, and that's because we actually passed a new operating levy. If you look on number 4, that $2.7 million increase, 1.28 is our new operating levy that's added there. So that's a change from what you saw back in September. Okay, so we're right on what we told everybody. It was about $1.3 million. So that's what that is. When you look at the local optional revenue, or LOR, that's the number 3, that increase there is totally because we have more students going into next year, so that's a growth factor. And then back to number 4, we talked about the $1.3 million increase because of the operating question that we passed. The rest of that increase is due to inflation. We have inflation built into our operating levies and the growth of our students. So there's 3 factors that go into that number that's increasing by $2.7 million. Again, this top portion, this is all discretionary funds for the school district that we can use for our program. You go to the second section, see assigned components. Now these are all restricted dollars. Every single line has to be used for some particular purpose. So achievement and integration, you see there we're now at $538,000 on the levy side. Remember, this is only 30% of our budget. We get another $1 million from the state of Minnesota. Our safe schools, this is the money that's used for SOR, our SRO officers, and some security pieces. Again, this is totally generated by the number of students that we have in our district. So you see a small increase because of our growth. Safe schools, also then for District 917, our intermediate districts have these dollars also available to them, but they don't have any levy authority. So all the member school districts levy these dollars and then push these dollars to the intermediate district. You see a small increase there of $5,000 for them. Our vocational, that's also a formula. You see we're getting the exact same amount from year to year. It's a little bit of help in our vocational area. That reemployment, that's unemployment that we had to pay out to different employees. You see that's way down from the year before. That 147 was a big piece coming out of COVID. QComp. Our QComp program, this again is shared with aid. This here is about 1/3, so the levy portion is about 1/3. We get about $2 million on the aid side. OPEB, other post-employment benefits. These are dollars that are used for our retirees, for all the severance that's available to them, mainly health insurance coverage in future years for our retirees. The way the OPEB works, we have an actuarial study that we do every other year. That dollar comes from there, and then at the end of the year, if we spend less than that or more than that, then there's a levy adjustment in the next year. So we only actually receive what we use. Lease levy. Remember, these are payments on the new additions on the elementary schools. It's for a small piece of this building. It's our community education building, their office spaces. Anyways, it's buildings that we do not own that we are leasing, and we're able to levy to make those payments. So that's what that piece is. And then, of course, District 917 is the same thing. Some of the buildings that they're using, actually most of the buildings that they're using, is all leased. So every district does a levy to pay for those leases for the intermediate district. Going on to number 14, you see here's the capital portion of our budget, our operating capital. Again, this is shared. We do get aid also. It's a smaller amount, but we get about a little over $2 million a year for capital funds. And this is really the only thing that we really have to buy. We need to buy vehicles, we need to buy furniture, things like that. We cannot use LTFM dollars for those. Of course, LTFM is next. This is the portion that goes to the general fund as pay-as-you-go. So it's about 1/3 of our LTFM projects come through the general fund here. Tiny bit of aid, very small amount. Then a capital projects levy. This is the one area of our budget that's based on a tax rate. When we ask the community for these dollars, that tax rate remains constant. So as you see this go up a little bit, that's because we have more connect tax capacity in our district than we did the year before. And again, those dollars all go either into our technology department, or they go into our STEM department, a small area for security. Again, the big change from September is just on the top line of the new question that we went out there. On the back page, community service. All these numbers are exactly the same as they were in September. Not one thing has changed. I want to point out there are small increases there. If you remember, you passed a resolution a little while back talking about how big our district is. So we have a little bit more population growth, so that's what you're seeing here, and the increase for community ed. You see a very relatively large prior year adjustment back towards the tail end of COVID. Our school age care, which is really our before school, after school care, we're able to levy for any special education kids that are involved in that program. And there was that 1 year, well actually 2 years, but we didn't have very many kids come, so we spent a lot less dollars. So the amount that we actually levied, there, that 566, we didn't spend it. So now we're giving that back because we didn't spend it. So it's going back to the taxpayer as a negative adjustment. Debt service. Again, what we're allowed to do is levy 105% of whatever our bond payments are for this particular year. In case someone's not paying their taxes, make sure that we have enough funds to pay. And then what happens, if we have extra, we don't need 105, we don't need, extra 5%, then we also give that back. If you look under line 3 there, the reduction for next excess, there's $1.2 million that's going back to the community because we didn't need that extra 5%. So that's what that's about. The other thing I want to point out, if you see the basic levy last year, we had $17.5 million, this year 3.7. Now these are, when we sell our bonds, those payment schedules go out for the whole 20, 30 years, whatever we have. And we work very hard to try to level those payments so they're very close to the same every year. But what happens is some years we got to hire a payment amount in our LTFM bonds instead of our building bonds. So they tend to flip back and forth. And that's why you're seeing that flip, because we have a lot more payment going to LTFM next year than we do our regular bonds. So I know it's a confusion factor for some of our taxpayers who have called me, is why is our basic levy way down and our voter approved levy is way down, but our other is way up. Well, this is why, and we'll see that flip back in years in the future. That was kind of a fast run through. We'll go through it in a little more detail in the meeting. But again, so we're seeing a total of a 8.8% increase. And of course, the bigger piece of that increase is because we passed a new levy, operating levy So we're a little more going into the levy for next year.
Any questions from board members on that right now? Nope. All right, so we've completed all of our items on our working agenda session. We'll have a little bit of a recess, and then we'll move into our regular session at 7 o'clock. Thanks.